Good morning, everyone, and good morning to those of you I can't see but who have the voice of God representing you. So it is absolutely my honor and pleasure to be here. I am currently the director of libraries at a small four-year college in upstate New York, but before that was my role, I was a collection development librarian for 8 years, and I always wanted to be here. And it never worked out, as library travel often doesn't for people, particularly younger professionals, and so I never got here. And now I'm here. And so this is a very lovely opportunity, and I am honored to be standing here this morning to kick off this day for you. I am also going to give you a little bit more context than that, because for anyone who does not know anything about me, you probably wonder why I'm standing here. So I'm the director of libraries and archives at SUNY Potsdam, which is one of our four-year colleges in the SUNY system. SUNY has 64 institutions. I'm one of the 12 four-year primarily undergraduate ones. We serve 4,000 students and 200 faculty. And so I hope that gives you a little bit of context about what kinds of observations I will be making. I'm trying to get the mic into just the right place here so it doesn't feedback, but you can still hear me clearly. I have 23 staff. I have 2 facilities, a main library and a music library, and we are staffed more than 100 hours each week. Additional context for you. My entire non-personnel expenditures budget for any given recent year is about $450,000. So as I talk about the details of some of the things that we've encountered, that's the context in which I'm operating. And so for today's talk, I provided the following blurb because you got to do this in advance, so I have to make stuff up even before I've decided what it is that I want to say. So what I made up at the time was that the best libraries were never simply buyers and warehouses for information, but something more than that, something centered around synthesis and access and creativity. And as our information ecosystem has shifted, it's forced our attention to the operational side of how we manage information, because it got so complicated. And some of us have lost sight of that creativity and access. We've handed over our shrinking resources to prominent publishers and vendors because that's how the system works. And I think that we may have lost sight of considering what our role in that system is, and I think that it's time to remind everyone that the power of libraries lies not in our passivity, but in our action. And that it's time to reclaim and redefine some of our roles in that system. And so I'm going to also note that I know this is a mixed conference audience, that there are many, many of our partners in the publishing and vending industry here today. I'm sorry, my job is not to speak for you. You have your own voices. My job is to speak for librarians. So this is going to be a very librarian-focused talk, and that's intentional. I also put a subtitle on this speech about being dear in Stockholm, and I will get to that part. So as I noted, this is just how our system works. We buy stuff. It's what we do. It's part of how we provide our services, our access, and fulfill our mission. But as the information ecosystem has shifted, we've been compelled to spend a lot of time, energy, and attention on the operational side of how we manage information. My job as a collection development coordinator from 10 years ago is similar, but not the same as the job that my current collection development coordinator, Marianne Hebert, does on behalf of our institution. Because the how of the work keeps changing, and it's changing very rapidly. We have new models, we have new opportunities, new resources, new needs. It's not just about anymore whether the focus of our programs have shifted and we need to accommodate that. Now we're looking at that plus whole new kinds of resources, entirely new kinds of models for buying those resources, new ways to access them, new ways to choose them, new ways to share them. And in that kind of environment where there's a whole side of what we do that is shifting very, very quickly and must be kept up with, it's very easy to just put a check mark next to the box that represents the stuff we've always done that way, regardless of how perhaps crazily unsustainable that checkbox actually is for us. Because that checkbox has become crazily unsustainable for many of us very slowly, but steadily. And we do it that way, so we do it that way, because that's the easy part. We commit our resources to vendors for their products because that's how the system works. But the system is increasingly not working for many of us anymore. In 2012, I kicked a serious hornet's nest when I publicly declared that negotiations with the American Chemical Society had failed and that SUNY Potsdam would cease to subscribe to their big deal for journal content. And I also proposed that other libraries should consider whether or not that was a route they wanted to take. And I did it in public. And I did it in writing. And so a lot of conversation resulted from that. A lot. Library conversation, the part that I valued the most, frankly. Media conversation. The Chronicle of Higher Education called me while I was on vacation. And a lot of vendor attention. And a lot of negative attention, because librarians don't say things like this. But what I took away from it most prominently was not the amount of conversation it generated for its own merits, but the fact that it was very clear from the feedback I got that I was not alone in saying, this system is broken. But I sort of am alone. I feel very alone some days when I stand up here and look out at crowds like this. Why is it so groundbreaking? Why was it so brave, as I was told many times over and over again, for me to simply say that this package of titles sold to us at this kind of profit by an organization is a poor choice for my institution? Why is it brave to stand up and say, this is not in the best interests of my users? Why is it newsworthy to say something that is simply true? Why did that turn me into some kind of weird folk hero? It doesn't make sense to me. And so I've asked a lot of people, I've asked a lot of librarians, why do you think we respond this way as a profession when something happens like this? And some of them have posited that it's something akin to Stockholm Syndrome. That we've been in this untenable, unhappy position, not of our own making, for so long that we've just tried to find a way to make it okay for us. That we've said, it's not so bad. And we've made peace. Others say that it's simply that librarians find themselves as the deer in the headlights of the digital age, oncoming, rushing, fast, completely stunned by how fast things have changed and completely unable to connect our brains to our feet and get out of the road. And I think that there's some truth to both of those assertions. But here's the thing. We're better than that. We are better than our current status quo. We are smart, we are agile, we are creative, we're dedicated, and we're passionate, and above and beyond any of those qualities, we're professionals. We know what we do, and we need to start acting like it. Because whether you see librarians as kidnapping victims, or deer in headlights, or something else entirely, whether your interpretation rests somewhere different than mine does, you have to acknowledge that the path we're on in those scenarios doesn't have a terribly cheerful outcome for librarians and libraries. If we continue to allow our publishing and sales partners to set all the terms, to control all of the market, and to define how our economic capital is distributed, we continue to be the deer, and we continue to hang out in Stockholm. And it's not going to end well. And so here's my simple statement. Yes, that is in fact how the system has always worked, but it needs to work better. And it's time for us to reclaim our rights and make that so. So what are our rights, you ask? Let me tell you. That's my job, right? I'm supposed to stand here and tell you stuff. So I think that the first right that we ought to be demanding is respect. As librarians with millions of dollars of purchasing power amongst us, we deserve a little damn respect. We are not supplicants. We are customers. We are, in fact, paying customers. It's appropriate that we demand to be treated with some respect. And by that, I mean things like responsive sales contacts who return phone calls and emails in a timely manner. I mean clear communications that answer the questions we've asked, not the questions that our partners think we want answers to. I mean being treated as though our concerns and interests are meaningful and have value as part of our customer sales relationship. And I mean policies that aren't absolutely alien to the values of our profession. I suspect that many of you could write your own addendum to that list. And you see enough smiles and nodding heads to know you've all got a thing based on how you've been treated over the years that is your pet peeve about how your worst vendors treat you. But I also suspect that we could all write a how this could be done well manifesto based on how we've been treated by the vendors who are good partners to us, who treat us with the respect that we deserve. And so why should we not all expect that best instead of settling for the worst? And so I'll repeat again, we are not supplicants. We are paying customers. And I don't mean to imply that we're always right. I really don't believe the customer is always right. I am a library director. I deal with 18-year-olds most of the time. I'm clear on how unreasonable the customer can be, and I have met my fair share of unreasonable librarians. But we deserve to be treated with some respect. And I would also posit there is nothing in our industry that wouldn't benefit from a little light shining into our darker corners. Library policies? Make them available. The logic behind the decisions you make? Share that. How you spend every penny you spend? Put that out there. Except, often we can't. Why? Non-disclosure agreements. So here's a thing I think is our right as purchasers. The right to demand transparency in pricing and negotiations. Just stop signing NDAs. In many cases, you really don't have to sign them. We just do it because it's how the system works. Strike those terms from your licenses. Inform your sales folks that you're not going to continue negotiations as long as those NDA terms are in place. And just say no. As I noted, you're the customer. The vendor won't agree? That's the challenge you're facing? Fine, go get some administrative cover. Talk up your food chain. Explain to your campus administration and legal why it is against the best interests of your institution to agree to these kinds of manipulations. See if they'll give you some backup. Tell them the story I was recently told, with no vendor names given and no consortium names given, but it was at a meeting talking about infrastructure in New York, information infrastructure in New York, about the consortium negotiator who discovered that not only did the vendor terms include non-disclosure language, there was also a requirement that the consortium actively attempt to thwart any freedom of information requests that would result in disclosure of terms. The contract literally said that we would be required to attempt to disobey the law. Tell your administration that this is the environment in which we're negotiating, that this is what we're fostering by agreeing to these kinds of terms. How could that possibly be in the best interests of our institutions? So I implore you to try and avoid NDAs, not because I'm on a crusade against all of our vendors, I'm really, really not, but because of that question. What do libraries gain from allowing this kind of obfuscation? How is it in our best interests to allow this to happen? Some people are going to claim that because they're willing to honor an NDA from a vendor, their library gets better terms, and that's probably true. Bet you're right. I believe you. But it's still manipulation. You know that. You're being pitted against the rest of your library community. As the tides and prices rise here, do you think that the high point of land on which your institution stands with its NDA-protected terms and deal is the point at which the tides stop rising? Do you think that high point of land is safe? Or do you think that perhaps the flood's going to keep coming, and that maybe by working together with some openness and some transparency, we could do a better job as a community of resetting the terms, building some sort of seawall that actually works for us, and protecting the best interests of libraries? If we can't work together, we can't do that. And if we can't share information, we can't work together effectively. And vendors who insist on confidentiality in negotiations are stopping us from doing that. And they're not doing it to protect us. So demand a little transparency. I would also like to believe, in theory, as paying customers, we could pick up our money and go somewhere else if we wanted to. But in reality, the content we want to purchase is not fungible. We all know that. In academic libraries, researchers aren't interested in a journal about their topic. They're interested in the journal about their topic. And we know who sells the journal, and so we have to deal with them to buy it. In public libraries, it doesn't matter how big your ebook or print holdings are if they aren't giving the community the bestseller that they want and need right now. So we all know it's not really a matter of shopping for alternate content. Sometimes it is, not always. But what we often believe in libraries is that we have venues for buying things. We can choose which consortium we want to work with. We can choose which buying agent we want to work with. We can choose which package we want to buy. We can pick and choose our content. Except when our vendors decide that those kinds of free market forces are just too much to bear and can't be allowed. So there's some dispute about this example right now. I'm waiting for confirmation from one side or the other. But recently, at my library, we were trying to find a good solution to sage pricing for a package for our institution. And we didn't like the terms we were offered through Waldo, which is one of our buying agents. So we asked Lyrasis, another consortial agent, if they had a deal that we thought had better terms. Lyrasis told us that Sage does not allow customers to switch consortia to acquire better terms. So, sorry, they weren't going to pursue pricing any further because it was a waste of everybody's time. Sage tells me that's not accurate, that of course customers can switch if they want to. So someone's either lying or very confused somewhere in this food chain of the information economy. And either way, my market choices don't feel very free right now. Or, with my apologies to those who rely on sponsorship for this conference, how about Elsevier? One would presume that we could buy any appropriate content offered in a package that we think suits our needs, right? I mean, they made packages, we want to buy one, that sounds about right, doesn't it? That sounds like the world we think we operate in, except, So SUNY queried Elsevier on our behalf regarding a package that my campus is interested in as a sidebar to the negotiations we're doing for a system-wide Elsevier contract. And I wanted more information. I wanted to know what the options would be if there was no system-wide contract. You know, what am I looking at here? And the informational message we got back said that each sales offer to a campus will be reviewed by a term, quote, to determine eligibility. This is done on a case-by-case basis, but institutions with annual subscription levels historically over $25,000 are generally scrutinized more heavily. In the end, those that qualify for College Edition will be offered the model as an add-on to their current holdings, end quote. So, okay, they're saying, yes, we're the customer, and we could buy that package if we wanted to, but they reserve the right to sell it to us, including what they think we should have, not just what we've asked for, and telling us what we must have in addition to what we're asking for, and priced at the cost they think we should spend on it. Great, thanks. Wouldn't it be cool if we had the freedom to actually buy what we wanted to buy, through whom we wanted to buy it, as presented as options by the vendors themselves, without their then interference in the choices that I'm making on behalf of my users and my institution? And so while I'm at it, how about fair and appropriate pricing? I'd just like to note that my husband's hair is longer than mine, so really, I'm not sure how that makes sense. This shouldn't be hard, right? Like, fair and appropriate pricing, this shouldn't be a hard one. When I was in the middle of discussions with the American Chemical Society about pricing, we had a really interesting conversation trying to find our middle ground. About 7 hours of really interesting conversation. And I learned that they have a good and thoughtful formula for calculating price tiers. The problem we determined and discovered is that they've laid that formula on top of an untenable base price, resulting in a system in which a Research One institution in SUNY with a doctoral level chemical research program pays barely more than half what I pay with my 4,000 students, 60 chemistry majors, and 7 faculty. I find that untenable, and that was where I ended. The leadership at the American Chemical Society disagrees with me. I also, as I mentioned, have a recent go-round with SAGE, in which our attempts to get a clear answer about how they calculated our price and our holdings led to a 15-email-long exchange with various parties involved and included language tossed around about inflationary upticks and top-up fees, with no definitions offered about what those were. despite repeated requests for clarification. In the end, the sales rep gave us an answer that quite simply to us felt as though we were being told that our spend is what our spend is. And so how would you like us to justify that today? Would you like fries with that? We could give you fries with that if you'll feel better about it. And we've all watched as we've been subjected to a near universal 5 to 10% price increase annually, despite the fact that the federal government is willing to tell us regularly that the rate of inflation is about 2%. And so we've been told also to accept this as a good deal, that we're negotiating great terms when we get a 5% annual bump over 5 years. But somebody explained to me exactly why it is that information, in this era of plenty and increasing ease of access and distribution, is more expensive at a rate that's outstripping the rest of our economy. Somebody explain that one to me. In something with some endpoint that doesn't include, we're making more money off you. So, really, is it so much to ask that our vendors price their products consistently, with some acknowledgement of how those products are actually used in our modern information environment, and with models that reflect actual economic forces in information, society, education, and then apply those prices in appropriate ways across all libraries? Is that so radical? Is it really so outlandish to suggest that that might be a right that we have as customers? This one matters to me a lot, as you might guess. Remember how I said I was lauded by what felt to me like way too many librarians as a hero after the ACS publicity? Why is it heroic to talk in public? Part of it is because of the kinds of abuse that you take when you do. I'm paraphrasing here with some snark, but I and others like me have gotten a lot of communication that reads like the statements I'm about to make. We'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one to see if we can reach a resolution to this issue, but not if you continue blogging. It's disrespectful to talk about us in public. Like swearing, cover your ears for the next 10 seconds. You said fuck online once, so we're not going to talk to you anymore, ever. I often wonder if I were a man if I would get that one. Our non-disclosure agreement has compelled you to dance around using real numbers while you try to talk about this issue, and we're going to use that void and that confusion to discredit you entirely. We won't negotiate with anyone who's been that disrespectful. You disagreed with us, and you did it publicly. We feel it's important to have these conversations one-on-one, so I'd prefer to make a phone call to you if you wouldn't mind, because then we're not putting anything in writing. And this one wasn't me. Those were all me. This one wasn't me. It was provided to me by a friend who was told that we'll give you a great deal on our product. We'll meet your terms. We'd be happy to negotiate to where you want to be. But would you please stop promoting open access? So here's the alternate truth. We are allowed to have voices. We are allowed to have opinions. We are allowed to do those things in public. And so unless your job is on the line, unless you've got reasons why you shouldn't do this, and you know what those reasons are, and I'm not going to judge anybody for operating within the constraints of their own life and environment. I understand. You're allowed to talk. Don't let anyone silence you. But rights aren't free. So I think we deserve those things, but we also have some responsibilities. We have to reframe our assumptions. We can't rail against the status quo if we keep ascribing to it, if we keep giving meaning to it, if we keep ascribing power to it. So you know why we have the big deal for journals? We have the big deal for journals because we keep buying them. We agree to this through word and deed. We've told all of our publishers and vendors that big deals are awesome because we keep giving them money for them. You want that to go away? You want there to be a different model? Reconsider your assumptions about what's appropriate and what works. So here are my two questions for you. Think about these things. Is more actually better? And are our consortial deals negotiated without our involvement, permission, or context helping? Think about those things. And know where your boundaries are. It's really easy to keep doing what we've been doing. It's really easy to agree to a slight shifting of terms from last year's contract, because last year's contract was fine, Stockholm. But what that doesn't allow for, when you say, yep, that's okay, that little shift is okay, what that doesn't allow for is any kind of clear-headed, strategic, comprehensive review of what kinds of terms, costs, criteria were being offered, and, most importantly, how we feel about that and why. So what are the impacts of each kind of offer on our collections, on our users, on our institution, on the industry as a whole? Do you know what those impacts are? When you consider your terms and your negotiations, have you thought about what you think is appropriate? Or do you find yourself thinking that this deal in front of you is absolute crap, but it's the best you're going to get, so despite the fact that you hate it, you're going to sign it? Why are you doing that? Why are you compromising your values? Ask yourself, what are your most important goals? What's in the best interests of your institution? And then when you know those two answers, when you believe in yourself and you believe you know those truths, what will you accept? We all have compromises we have to make. We all say, yes, I can do this because it's more important than that. We all have to make those choices. But what will you accept? And what will you not accept? Where is your line in the sand? How far are you willing to go? Do you know? You need to know. It's one thing for me to stand here and say, this is all wrong. And to say that we can't agree to these terms, we can't operate this way, etc. It's another to live it. It's another thing to actually change our behavior. And so I've stopped agreeing to what I see as abusive terms and behavior from our very worst vendors. And this is what it is. It is abuse. Let me provide you a scenario, a couple statements. NDAs limit our ability to communicate as a community of professionals. Vendors ask us to circumvent the law. Vendors use their non-fungibility of their information against us if we threaten to walk away. And then they offer us the equivalent of candy in order to attain our silence about our treatment. Let me reframe that for you in domestic terms. Your spouse won't let you talk to your friends. Your spouse asks you to break the law for them. Your spouse reminds you that you can't support yourself without them, and so if you walk away, you'll be homeless. Your spouse buys you presents in exchange for your silence about the state of your home life. That sounds awful, right? And yet, we're accepting the same treatment professionally. A little less sensationally. Again, apologies about the sponsors. The Copyright Clearance Center. They offer us paid services and professional development opportunities, and they market themselves in ways that frame them as being very useful to librarians who are floundering a bit as we look for answers to the complex questions of copyright in this information environment. It's so nice of them, so useful, how great. What the Copyright Clearance Center doesn't say publicly is that they have an agenda, and it's not ours. Because they then turn around and take our money, and then they use that money, and along with their corporate name, to support lawsuits against libraries. Lawsuits that seek to restrict the fair use of copyrighted material in educational environments. If you don't know what I'm referring to, go check out the e-reserves lawsuit brought against Georgia State University. Check out who was prosecuting that. What they did there is the equivalent of some third party standing outside your supermarket and saying, here, let me help you carry your groceries to your car, and it'll just be a small fee. And then please just look away while I use your money to pass a law that says you're not allowed to carry your own groceries anymore, thereby forcing you to pay me to carry them for you. And that's abusive. And we have to stop accepting that behavior as acceptable. This one's both very simple and very difficult. Just pay attention. How many libraries know the terms of every one of their license agreements? How many libraries know the terms of the license agreements agreed to on their behalf by a consortia? How many libraries know the terms of the license agreements that were agreed to on their behalf by their state library or their university system? How many libraries know where their pricing stands in the realm of all the pricing from that vendor? Do you know what your neighbor is paying for the same product? How many libraries know what new models are evolving in the profession? What new possibilities are you eyeing? There's a lot to know, but we can't demand our rights if we don't also take responsibility for understanding our context. And you're here. That is a brilliant step. I just ask that you please exhort all of your colleagues to make the same kind of steps, because awareness of these things really, really matters. And we must demand the freedom to speak. And if we're going to demand the freedom to speak, we have to also use it. If it's our right, it's also our responsibility. It's like voting, right? Don't complain about the government if you're not going to vote in the election. Don't complain that nobody's talking if you're not willing to talk. So cut the silence. Break free. Speak. Speak to vendors. Speak to faculty. Speak to users. Speak to administrators. Speak to your community. Speak to each other. Just speak. And take some action. Do something. No one is going to solve these problems for us. If we're going to see an evolution of our industry, if we're going to see a resolution to the cereals crisis, if we're going to see a future beyond the big deal, we have to be agents of action. I opened with the statement that the best libraries have never been simply buyers or warehouses for information, that we are something more, that we are centered around synthesis and access and creativity. And if that's an ideal, it's not just an ideal for our users. It's an ideal about what we can be too. It's an ideal about what we can do and how we can do it. So let's build a new system. Let's find a new way. Let's build new partnerships, new relationships, and find something more creative, more agile, and more accountable than what we've been offered up to this point. Let's act. We cannot assume that these other players have our best interests at heart. We're the librarians. It's our job to look out for libraries. Let's do that. Let's do our job. We must own it. We must exercise our rights, and we have to just do it. And I say that because we deserve better than to look like deer stuck in Stockholm. We deserve better than abusive sales relationships. We deserve more than being providers of cash to sales partners that don't really care about us. We are more than purchasing agents. We're librarians. We're information professionals. We're smart. We're savvy. We're creative. We're passionate. We're dedicated. And I think we also all know we are damn stubborn. So we can be smarter. We can be more vocal. We can be more influential. We can be powerful. But only if we choose to demand our rights and exercise our responsibilities. No one is going to offer us power because we're nice people. So be more. Be more than a customer. Be a partner. And be better. Thank you.
Now, just to remind everybody, come up to the microphone in each of the halls if you have a question. I'm going to ask a question myself, not of Jenica, but of the audience in Carolina, who I can see. How many vendors and publishers who deal with selling to libraries are there in this hall? Could they raise their hands? Not that many, actually. It's disappointing. Anyhow, maybe some of them will have questions. Now, I'm going to firstly ask, do you have anything, Rachel, from the tweets? No? Okay. There is firstly a question from Carolina. Give your name, please, and where you come from. Another Brit, you notice.
Yes.
It's something that's frightening.
Yes.
And they're very keen that we not only discuss that on basic collection development, resources, and different types of licenses. They actually have asked us, to make up a whole course on license negotiation. Now, we do have an opportunity in our program to offer small modules, one credit courses in our summer term, where we students can pick a mix and put 3 courses together to make up the equivalent 3 small courses together to make up the equivalent of a regular one. And we did
Actually managed to offer a course on licensing last year, but this year we had difficulty finding a practitioner to come and contribute to that, because we did want somebody who was engaged in the field to do that. Now, I think it'd be a great idea if we could get a community of practitioners who were interested in this area and had the experience to put together a module that could be shared.
Sorry, Sheila, could you ask a question? I'm sorry. Could you ask a question?
Oh, okay. Would you be willing to work with other community practitioners in the community to try and put together a resource that would be useful to help not only students, but I think a lot of early career practitioners as well, to actually deal with these issues and understand what they're up against?
I think that that's incredibly important. And I am only about to say what I'm about to say because as I step away from the podium, I'm pregnant. And so I'm not saying yes to anything right now. But I think that you're on the right track, because so many of us get dumped into the profession with a lot of theoretical knowledge and no idea how you actually do this stuff. And so creating more professional resources that are revolving around the things that have evolved in our profession as huge issues, like licensing, and how to deal with these things, and how to think about these things, and what to consider, and what's acceptable, and what's normal. We need more of that. And we do need, I think we absolutely need the practitioners in the field to do it. If I weren't 5 months pregnant, I'd say yes.
Well, that's great. I mean, we have some excellent community resources available in some of the emerging areas, like the Data Management Planning Toolkit and the Data Curation Profiles resource, and something similar that's all about our bread and butter activities would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anthony?
Yeah, I'm going to say, can we have Colonial first? Is the Colonial got anybody?
Yes, we are
Please
here.
go ahead, then Gold, and then the gentleman at the back here. Okay?
Yes, we have one question in Colonial.
Thanks very much for the description of librarians.
Could you have your name and affiliation, please?
Hello. My name is Todd Kelly. I'm the Vice President for Library and Information Services at Carthage College, Kenosha, Wisconsin. And thank you very much for your comments about librarians. I noticed, though, that you didn't say that we're forward-looking. And I'm wondering if we need more of a Wayne Gretzky approach to librarianship. He said he was successful because he skates to where the puck is going, not where the puck is. And all your comments seem to be focused on where the puck is. So I wonder if you can address the issue of sort of being the Wayne Gretzkys of the library world.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think we are absolutely awful strategic planners as an industry. I have had more this is not the only thing I talk about, and one of the things I talk about regularly is the failure of library leadership to look ahead and figure out where we need to go. I find it deeply dismaying, in fact. If you would like to ever look at some evidence that it's not just me saying we are really crappy at this, the Ithaca S&R survey of librarians from 3 years ago, they just ran a new one and I haven't seen the results yet, but the 3-year-old survey basically said that pretty much nobody in library leadership has a plan for dealing with the emerging changes in our industry. It's incredibly disheartening data. And so I don't talk as much about getting ahead of it because I think that we haven't even figured out that what we're doing is wrong. That's why I'm not talking about skating to the puck, because we haven't even figured out the puck's not in front of us yet. So I mean, I guess I'm just trying to start from this is where our community awareness seems to be, so I'll start here. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to be trying more creative things. We need to build our own new solution where the puck is instead of where the puck is going instead of where the puck is. Because quite frankly, I don't even think we're standing next to it anymore. I think it's already moved and we're looking for it.
Now we have somebody from Gold.
This is Jack Montgomery, Western Kentucky University in the Go Room. First of all, we've got people waiting, but I want to say I have waited years in Charleston to hear this talk, and I commend you. This is awesome.
Thank you very much.
What you're advocating is true consumer advocacy, and there is a mechanism by which we could establish. I came out of law libraries, and the mechanism is there. However, I want you to understand this can get very, very ugly if you start to really impact some of these people's bottom line. So be aware that you will pay a price for stepping forward.
I know.
Now we have
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. There is a price for stepping forward, but what's the cost if we don't? So,
my name is Laura Delancey. I'm Electronic Resources Librarian at Western Kentucky University. I loved your talk. I loved all the points you made. I wondered if you could give your thoughts with how to deal with pushback from faculty if, in the interest of librarian advocacy, we are not making deals with the providers of content that faculty hold near and dear. Because I would love to do some of the things that you are advocating, but I would worry that it would be a terrible career move.
It is crucial. And it is a long, slow process that we all need to start now. Because you can't wait until it's time to make the decision to start talking about it. The American Chemical Society issue on our campus worked for us because I'd spent 3 years talking with our chemistry faculty about rising costs and the unsustainability of what we were facing, and explaining where we were at, showing them all the options that we had. They're scientists, give them the data. Showing them all the options we had in front of us and making it clear that we were going to do the best we could for them. We will always do the best we can for them, but that sometimes it's simply just not possible. But it was a 3-year process. We didn't just get there because I showed up at a department meeting and said, hey, we're going to cancel that package you love. That's never going to fly. It was a long, careful, intentional process on my part. And I think that it's simply just starting the conversation. Get your foot in the door. Have the first talk with someone so that you can have the second, and the third, and the fourth. Find your allies, find your route, and go.
Now from Carolina, please, the gentleman in the back.
My name is Sandy Thatcher. I'm a retired University Press director, but I couldn't resist the temptation to respond to your critique of the Copyright Clearance Center because I'm a member of the CCC's board of directors. I'm not officially representing the CCC here, so what I say here is my personal view and doesn't represent CCC's official position. But my essential response would be to say that in order to understand why the publishers with CCC backing brought the suit, you need to really go back and read about the history of the case. I actually wrote an article for Against the Grain in 2008, which did that. And basically, even Kenny Cruz, who was brought on board as expert witness by Georgia State, admitted in his book on copyright the University of Chicago published that Georgia's Board of Regents policy on copyright was an extreme case. It represented the views of a Georgia law professor named L. Ray Patterson, which were idiosyncratic at best, and the Attorney General of the state, when the suit was brought, decided that particular viewpoint and policy was not defensible, and so they abandoned it right away and instituted a new policy which essentially mirrored Kenny Cruz's own approach to copyright and fair use that he had started in Indiana and then later imported to Columbia. But,
and yet the lawsuit went forward.
But
and they lost.
Let me also explain
Sandy,
why.
I think this had better be an offline thing because it's going on to... Well, let's finish off your point now, please.
Yeah, let me explain that the reason that the appeal was brought is because it's basically bad law. I won't say anything more about that.
Thank you.
But my question to you is this. Are you aware of the approach to copyright that the Association of Research Libraries is taking now? Because it has, for instance, backed off attempting to work out legislative approaches to orphan works. Its policy threatens the possibility of undercutting the entire paperback market for university presses and so on.
Yeah.
So what I would ask you is how much you have studied the ARL's own approach to copyright and whether you think that's the correct approach for libraries to be taking.
To be frank, I ignore ARL stuff because I am not an ARL, and quite often their approaches have no bearing on mine. Because my institution, it just does not reflect the same values and needs. I also will note that I will never, ever stop defending fair use as a crucial piece of what we do.
Okay.
So, two questions in one.
Yes.
What can we do to reward publishers who treat us well with more than our money? And an individual question is, how can university presses, are there vendors that we can work with and build a new and different world?
These are from tweets.
Yes, thank you, Twitter. Hi. I have vendors that I love working with. And when I do, I tell them so directly, and I say it publicly. And I say why. Because if we're going to complain publicly, we need to praise publicly. It's management philosophy, right? You have to balance that out, right? If you're gonna publicly say this is broken, you also have to publicly say this is what's working. So, for the record here today, my EBSCO sales rep is the best guy I have ever worked with. Jim Cropland at EBSCO is my friend. He treats us well. So there are vendors that do work well, and I also think that it's absolutely fair to say to one vendor, the sales rep that I work with from this vendor treats me this way and I like it. Could you possibly consider doing this? Because we act as though there's no communications back and forth here, but there are. They're all looking at each other. Everyone's looking for industry information. So how about we start sharing that ourselves, our own perspectives on what's good and what's bad? I think we just all need to engage on all fronts.
Thank you very much. Now, I think the question here from Carolina, and then we'll go upstairs again.
Hi, Jenica. I'm David Horowitz. I'm Vice President of Sales at Sage.
Hi, David.
Hi, Jenica. I couldn't resist.
Thank you.
Brandon Nordine's here, too, from the ACS. If you guys wanted to do this together, that'd be great.
Thank you for stepping forward. It's very brave of you.
No, well, you may be surprised to know that I really enjoyed your remarks and appreciate them, and I want Sage to be one of your vendors that you value as much as you do your EBSCO partnership. So I've been trying to make things right in the emails from Friday and Tuesday around transparent offer.
Yes.
And letting you know about the fact that I feel like we didn't...
There has been a lot more clarity since you stepped in, and I appreciate that.
Terrific. And, we do aim to be a very transparent publisher. Our non-disclosure language in our agreement says that you can freely share your deal details with other members of your consortium. And I just would love to have coffee with you if you have time while you're here, and because you're really tough to get.
We'll see what we can do. I have some meetings set up already, but yes.
Does she answer her emails? No?
No, not this week. I've been a little busy.
Upstairs, anybody from Colonial? Gold?
I would say, and this is Jack Montgomery again, one thing I really appreciate is that you touched on the family-oriented or the domestic aspect of this relationship, because to engage in abuse, as anyone knows who does family counseling, you have to have a certain level of codependency. And we have participated in that abuse as a profession. I remember trying to advocate to be more consumer-oriented, and one librarian said, but they may not do the receptions for us at ALA. And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and thought, this is why we have the problem, because people are afraid and they have gotten comfortable and snug, and they're afraid to come forth and say, maybe we're not getting a good deal. It's very domestic if you think about it.
And I would also, I absolutely agree, and I would like to say that I maybe didn't say this explicitly, but we actually have power in that relationship. Would you all like to note that a vice president of sales just stood up to talk to me because I've called out his company publicly? We have power. We can use it. We simply have to break out of this mindset that we can't offend anybody because they might get upset with us.
If I could say, though, something is, I'm not a publisher anymore, but I have been, and I know that decades publishers have had library focus groups, library advisory groups, and every year you say to them, what are the changes? The librarians couldn't agree at all.
Of course.
So why don't you get your act together? That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But it hasn't happened yet, has it? People have said this before here, years and years of people, but why isn't it happening?
I have no idea why it's not happening. Make it happen.
Make it happen, everybody. That's the end of that session.
Thank you all.